I'm James Rule. Welcome to the Lonely Leader podcast, where we help existing and aspiring leaders find clarity, build resilience, drive performance, and enhance fulfillment. Leadership, in my opinion, is not just about command, it's about connection. When I first stepped into becoming a CEO, I was in my late 20s. It was my first CEO role. I had no gravitas in that position. So I could have gone down the path of command and authority, do this, now do that, a very transactional focus on leadership, if you will. But I had a gut feel, a hunch that this was much more about building connection and that people don't follow a job title. Yes, there may be compliance, but there isn't commitment. What generates commitment is building a real connection, letting people see you as a human, but more importantly, understanding them as a human, the person behind the role. Now, that was very instinctive. As I say, when I stepped into that first role, there was no roadmap that had been showed there. But over the following decades, my leadership journey has 100% validated that theory is sound. It is essential, in my opinion, for every leader. My experience coaching leaders all around the world and the research I have studied all adds further weight to this notion that we must seek to connect and build real connection if we want to find high performance in our people and in ourselves and build a truly high-performing organization. I see many leaders get stuck in that transactional trap. The notion of, I'm in command, I will tell you to do this, now do that, hit this target, deliver on this KPI. And yes, of course, there is a need for accountability. You do need to help steer the ship. You do need to steer a course. However, we can't get stuck in that transactional trap, because if we do, then we're building compliance. Now, compliance will give us a set of minimum standards. People will do the ABCs. They will do the basics because that is what their boss is expecting and demanding in that transactional style. However, when we can build real connection, then we step into a world of discretionary effort, and that transforms the culture, the performance, because we can't force people to go to those higher levels of performance. But when we've built the connection, they want to go to those higher levels. They want to give you that discretionary effort because they feel seen and valued, because you've genuinely connected with them. So you get far more out of them and everybody wins. When I look back on my leadership journey, there are so many things that I've got wrong, things that you learn from, things that you course correct in, and that's the same for everybody's leadership journey. But this one instinctive notion was 100% right, and it shaped my leadership philosophies and has done to this very day. It became a mission to better understand my people, because we all know the common sense logic behind this. Nobody is an employee and that's their sole life. It doesn't matter who you're talking about, which organization, what level of seniority. Everybody has multiple roles that they are occupying outside of their working role. They're a son or a daughter. They may be a brother or a sister. They may be a parent. They are a friend. They may be a carer for somebody that is sick. Whatever individual you look at, there is a whole world, a whole life that they operate in outside of their work. So it makes absolute sense to try and connect with that and better understand them as people. Now, as this philosophy lands, you might think, well, that's all just about asking questions. And yes, naturally, we need to ask questions to get people to open up and understand what matters to them outside of work. But actually, first and foremost, it starts with you as the leader showing your humanity, being willing to open up and show what you are about, what you value, what you enjoy, where you like to spend time away from work. Now, some people will recoil at this and say, no, I'm not doing it. Humor me. I'm not saying you have to share your most intimate thoughts or have absolutely no privacy or filter with every member of staff in your organization. You need to find your own level. But at the very least, let people know what you are interested in. So when I first started out as a CEO, I was a single man. A big part of my life was still playing semi-professional rugby, and so that would naturally be part of a conversation on a Monday morning. I've always had a passion for dogs and pets, and therefore there's always an affinity there with other dog owners within an organization. Health and fitness has always been important to me. So there's elements of conversation and connection there with other people that share those passions. I spent a number of years renovating properties alongside my professional role. And so that was a cause for conversation. So you're not having to divulge every facet of your life, but you can explore and discuss some of the things that make you you. Now, obviously, as I matured, I then met my wife and started a family, and that became a central hub of who I am. I would to this day say my most important roles are that of a husband and as a father. So being willing to talk about that, the challenges of parenthood, what's going on with my children was another way to build real connection. And indeed, when I was working in professional sport, there were game weekends on 30 or 40 weekends of the year. And my young daughters would always accompany me, and my wife as well. And they were a key part. People would see my children around the organization. They would see me kicking a ball around on the field after a game with them, because that is who I am. That connection and presence with my family is a hugely important part of what I am about. And therefore, it's powerful for people to see that. And the more people recognize that you are more than just your job title, the more that they are willing, almost they have permission to share a little bit about themselves. So it has to start with the leader. You have to show a little bit about, this is who I am, these are my likes, these are my passions, this is what I like to do away from work. And people will connect with that. They will be drawn to that, and they will start to open up and share more and more insights about who they are, what they stand for, what they like to do away from work. And the connection and the synergy starts to develop. As I began to understand the power of showing your humanity, showing who you are, naturally I wanted to look at ways to integrate that into the culture of the organization. Now, talk and actions is obviously integral to shaping a culture, but I started to reflect on simple steps, simple changes to policy that would really drive this forward. So one such example was I decided that wherever possible, I would give people an extra day's holiday to utilize on their birthday. Now, there'll be HR directors and people logistically thinking, no, nightmare, I don't want to consider that. And yes, in a sports organization, it wasn't always practically possible to do that. Sometimes people's birthday would land on a core day, like our match day, for instance. That being said, they could have that day in lieu. But why? Why was this important? Well, it's about seeing your people as human beings. It's the same principle. Who really wants to be working on the birthday? Doesn't matter how much we love our jobs, and we all love them to varying degrees. There'll be some people that absolutely embrace every facet of the job, and there are some people listening that perhaps don't. But the reality is, as much as you might love them, you'd probably still rather be spending the day with your husband or your wife, or engaged in your most powerful passion or hobby. And so I started to run that experiment, and it was validated. People were so grateful. People loved that opportunity. Their performance, for anybody that's rolling their eyes and going, this would never work, their performance on the couple of days leading up to that day off was superb. And their performance the day after when they came back in was equally superb. So we didn't miss a beat. In fact, we gained from a performance perspective, but it brought that human side to the fore. I see you as more than just a cog in the wheel, a robotic operative designed to deliver KPIs. I see you as a human, and I want you to go and have a great birthday. Equally, softer side, but equally important to me, anybody who had sickness or illness in the family, it was a no questions asked, just go and deal with it. That was very important to me, that if somebody's partner or children needed support, then I trusted my staff that they could go and they could deal with that, and I would get that trust back tenfold. Now, it's easy to say it'll be abused, and potentially it could be. But I guarantee if you chain a member of staff to the proverbial office desk while someone that they care about is struggling, you're not going to get the best out of them anyway. So I would rather go down that other route and allow them to go and take care of the people they love the most. And equally, not always as easy to do, but family events. For any of you listening that are parents, you know the volume of things that will come along on a school calendar, and you can't get to all of them, but there are some that you dearly want to be at. The Christmas pantomimes, the sports day events, certain key moments in your child's development that you would love to be there for. And for many, it's not possible. So trying to create that possibility, encouraging staff to look ahead and say, what's coming up this year? Where do you need to be? How do we make that work for you? These steps sound so simple, but they had a really galvanizing effect on the people I was leading that said, I respect, I value your contribution. I want you to be happy and connected to all facets of your life. It's not just about your professional role. And that really did something to the culture. It really built that connection, that trust. When we talk about discretional effort, those things were like credits in the bank. People were super grateful. And when pressure came on down the road, or there was a requirement to work a little bit harder or longer, it was more than accepted. And I accept that there will still be some cynics saying, this is too soft for me. I don't see the benefit of it. Well, let me just pull out 3 or 4 areas that come to mind immediately that you will get a benefit from by building this level of connection and putting the human relationship at the center of what you're doing. First and foremost, difficult conversations. It doesn't matter who you are leading, however competent and high performing they are, at some point, with most of the people that we lead, we'll have to have a difficult conversation. Perhaps the standards have slipped. Perhaps they dropped the ball on a project and they've made a crucial mistake. It'd be rare that anybody would go through their entire tenure with you and you don't have to have a difficult conversation. Nobody likes them. That's why they're called difficult conversations. But they are always much easier to execute when you have built that level of connection, that level of trust, and that rapport through the actions that we've alluded to so far in this podcast. Those difficult conversations are much easier to initiate, and I guarantee they are much more respectfully and received much more effectively by the individual that you've got to talk with. Secondly, as a leader, you want to drive standards. You may have been new into your role, recruited from the outside, or promoted into it from within. However your route in brought you to this position, invariably you will have an aspiration to make things better, which when you break it down into the detail means you need to drive the standards of what's happening, drive the standards of performance. Now, people don't always like change, and people are not always comfortable of being told, hey, we need to do this better, smarter, we need to work harder. Again, it sits behind those difficult conversations, similar but different. People will much more willingly accept that desire to drive, to push, to grow, to develop, to do things more effectively if we've built a connection on which to work from, as opposed to being stuck, as I said at the start of the episode, in that transactional trap. I want more, I expect more, and you're going to give me more just because I am the boss and I'm telling you to. That level of compliance will get you so far, but it will never truly tap into that discretional effort that I talked about and that higher level of commitment. And last but not least, accountability is embraced. Many leaders struggle with the old sloping shoulders at some point in time. You thought somebody had accountability for something, but they start to slip into the ambiguity of the shadows. Did we say that? Was it black? Was it white? I thought it was more grey. And things start to stall. You find a much higher level of accountability, moving things forward, linked into the standards, linked into the difficult conversations. I want you to be accountable of what happens next and make some changes. We need accountability. To sustain high performance, we can't have people operating in that ambiguous grey area. We need clarity, and we need people having accountability to take the actions to move us forward. If you've built a connection, there is a willingness to take accountability. People feel connected, they feel a sense of belonging, and they want to take accountability and move things forward. So I hope that snapshot there, for even the most cynical listener thinking too soft for me, gives you a tangible performance-related necessity of why you need to put that human side first, expose it in you, and understand it in your people. That you win from that moral perspective of making people feel seen and valued, but you also win equally from a performance perspective about getting the best and optimizing the performance of your people and wider organization. So when placed like that, hopefully you can see it is an absolute no-brainer that this has to become a cornerstone of your leadership philosophy. I just want to share some data now that really brings this theory to life, if you will. So, diving into the Gallup State of the Global Workplace Survey, which takes place every year, always some interesting stats, two or three to pull out here. Highly engaged teams produce 21% greater profitability. They experience 18% higher productivity, have a 23% lower turnover. And interestingly, managers, leaders account for 70% of the variance in that engagement. So, what we're seeing there is if we can engage, if we can, the word I'm using today, connect, then we see a huge impact on the productivity and the profitability of our business and in reduced turnover. As I've said earlier in this episode, this level of connection builds trust. And that notion of trust is really important to me. I just want to draw your attention to some data in the Harvard Business Review, where they've looked at high trust organizations. And they break it down to say that when employees are in high trust environments, they report 74% less stress, 106% more energy at work, a 50% higher level of productivity, and they feel a 76% higher level of engagement. So, once again, different format, different source. We've got the Gallup State of the Global Workplace. We're into the Harvard Business School here. Same principles are coming to the fore. Higher levels of engagement, higher levels of productivity. And there's more. There's more data that we can share. If we look at Better Up and the workplace belonging research they've done, because again, connection, we've talked about it from a trust perspective, it gives you that sense of belonging, and some of the core stats that come out there, that people show a 56% increase in their level of performance as assessed by their bosses, experience a 50% reduction in staff turnover, and on average 75% fewer sick days are being taken. So we've talked about the impact from a turnover point of view where staff are leaving, but also reducing the time that they're absent from the role through sickness. And the last interesting perspective I drew from some of my research on this topic sits around neuroscience and research into the brain processes and social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. So authoritarian leadership styles, that very dictatorial transactional style, actually activates a threat response in our brains. But supportive leadership, leadership that builds that connection, actually activates that reward circulatory system. The dopamine and the oxytocin are released. So in short, what you could take from that is a straight command structure triggers defense, whereas that connection triggers contribution. And all of the data is pointing back to that. It triggers contribution, it triggers that discretional effort. As usual, this will come easier to some of you than others, but some simple practical steps to start this ball rolling is challenge yourself. How many non-transactional conversations have I had this week? Or set yourself a goal. How many do I aspire to have? So what do I mean by that? Well, you're not just saying, have you done that report? Is Project X finished? That's back into the transactional trap. It's questions such as, how was your weekend? That's a simple, open question that will give you an insight into how people spend the time and what they like to do. As a weekend approaches, have you got anything exciting planned for the weekend? Those two questions will open lines of insight that perhaps you've been blind to in the past. Because people will say, oh, I'm going for a park run with my children, or I'm going for a round of golf, or I'm going away for a weekend with my new partner, or I'm going to go and watch my daughter play hockey. I'm going to go and watch my son play baseball. I'm going to go, whatever they're going to do, duly noted, you start to build that picture of what they are about. Equally, then the second key step is share something. So if somebody is into running and you share that, or you're aspiring to get into that, well, there's a connection there. If they've shared something about watching an activity that their children are involved in, there's a natural follow-up there about what you've spent the weekend doing with your children or plan to do with your children. If they're going out somewhere for a meal with their partner, you could ask where are they going? If you've been before, you can give them a recommendation, or you could ask for their recommendation because you've never been. Let me know what you think to it. If they're going to watch a show at the theatre or a movie, oh, I think I might enjoy watching that with my wife. Let me know what you think. All of these very, very simple questions start to build that connection. And it is simple. It's a mindset. It's a desire to say, I am going to step into that non-transactional world and show more of me and get to understand more of my people. As ever, I hope this episode inspires you to reflect and take some different actions. I'm very comfortable saying when I stepped into my CEO role in my late 20s, this was a bit of a punt. I was significantly younger than my predecessor. I was a different individual. I was wired differently. And there were plenty of things he did well that I couldn't do as well. But I thought, well, I can build connection. I feel like I'm quite good at developing empathy and rapport. And that experimental sort of aspect of my leadership philosophy stood me in good stead and continued to be a cornerstone of everything I did. I now see it being utilized to huge impact in clients that I'm fortunate enough to coach. And where anybody is struggling, where they're getting too bogged down in strategy development and transactional leadership styles, I'll encourage them to step into this space. There are a number of areas in here that you can start with, but remember, there is a business benefit to doing this. This is not just about being nice, being soft and fluffy, and all the other dismissive phrases that the more cynical of you might say. This is about getting a high-performing team, building that high-performance culture, getting the best out of your people. Tactical training, technical training will happen in every organization and is imperative. Of course, we need that technical, tactical know-how, whatever our role. But then the X factor comes from getting the best out of your people. And to get the best out of them, you show yourself as a person, you build that humanity in what you do, and you build that rapport and that connection with your staff. When you fuse that with a high level of technical competency, special things start to happen. The difficult conversations are handled easily. The standards are rising. The discretionary effort is coming to the fore. The output as individuals and as a group continues to rise, and people want to be a part of it. As we've said from the data, productivity rises, people's level of sickness and absenteeism falls, turnover of staff reduces to an almost non-existent flow, because why would people want to leave an environment where they feel connected, valued, seen? All those secretions of hormones and the dopamine, etc. It's not about threat and feeling intimidated by an authoritarian style. It's actually feeling connected and respected. So it's a place you want to be. People don't want to leave that sort of organization. So the science is there. My lived life experience is there. This is a place I would love you to step into. And as with every single topic we talk about, if you decide, oh, I need some more guidance in here, I would like James to help support, coach me through this, mentor me through this, then reach out through all the communication options that we have in our show notes. It will be my pleasure to have an insight call with you. And people have asked, what is this insight call you often mention? An insight call is just, let's jump on Zoom or Teams together. No obligation, no hard sell. Let's have a conversation about where you are, explore how I might be able to help you. And if that feels right, and only if that feels right, then maybe we'll step forward and enter into a more structured coaching and mentoring type relationship. But I have those insight calls each and every week. So if this content is piquing your interest and you would like some additional support to get the best out of you and also out of the people that you lead, then do reach out. As usual, I want to close by wishing you the very best of luck on your continued journey of growth and development. Thanks for listening to the Lonely Leader podcast. I'd be very grateful if you could share and follow if the content resonates. And if you're looking for additional free resource to support your continued growth and development, then please do check out our social media and website details in the show notes. Remember, quality leadership on the outside must always start within.